You're listening to The Breakfast Show here on Faith FM. With myself, Skafy, I have DJ Shells here with me as my co-host today.
DJ Shells. I love that name.
Great to have you here. And of course, we have the other two DJs here.
Yeah.
We have DJ Shell and DJ Tish commanding the production desk.
We really should have found me a different name, shouldn't we? Shells and Shell is so close together.
The Shells and Shell Show. We need to get both of you to
We
have
did.
to
We
do the
did a
same
Christmas show together at the end of the last year.
Shell and Shells.
It was the two nutty seashells. It was great.
Okay, very good. We are going to talk about new details that have been emerging from the federal government's new hate speech laws.
Yep, that's going to be interesting.
And which keeps us wondering, is there anything new under the sun? But we will look into that. We're going to look into some of these details and see what's there and if something to boo or to cheer. We are also going to get a new quiz question and talk about PayPals.
Pen pals.
Pen pals, yeah.
PayPals. I'd love a PayPal. Who's going to pay me to be that pal?
Yeah. So pen pals. It's Paul or pal? How do you say
They
it?
still crack it up.
That's right. Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about that. You know what it is. Shells is going to bring us some good news about that. But before we get into any of it, I would like to ask for a new quiz question. Please, Tish.
Okay. The next one is, how long was the ark?
How
simple.
long?
How
Physically
long was the ark?
Okay, are you going to give us a multiple choice?
Now, we just want the qubits. How long was it? We'll let you know that it's 3 digits.
If
No,
you
wait,
think
that's
you
how
know,
many years.
Oh, man.
If you think you know, please text in. We would love to know. 0491 064 669.
I don't know.
Let's see who comes closer to the number because
Let's have a look.
I don't have a pretense to.
Oh, 3 digits. Well, hang
3
on.
digits.
I'll knock
Yes,
off the
one
last
correct
one.
Did I get the exact right number?
Oh, you got
One
it.
correct
man.
answer.
Can I see?
Well
Yeah.
done.
Okay, if you don't believe it,
If you
can
think
see.
you know,
Yeah.
please let us know. How
halfway
long
there.
was the
Yeah,
ark?
I was like, I thought that my guess was just a wild guess. I knew that it was in the ballpark though,
Okay.
but I had no idea that I was going to nail the exact number on by the decimal houses. Like I'm actually a little
There's
bit
no
impressed.
decimals, guys. He's just...
Oh, every number has decimals. If you know your mathematics.
Completely
point.
correct.
Oh.
Okay, if you do know the answer to that one, 0491 064 669. How about exchanging notes with people that you don't see, that live abroad or live far away, having a pen pal?
Now-
Have you had a pen pal before?
I have. What generation are we up to?
I think that Gen Alpha.
Are we
I
at
think
Gen
it is.
Alpha?
Yeah.
What are you, Letitia?
I'm Gen Z.
You're Gen Z. I think my girls are Gen Z. Is it? I think there's Gen X.
Gen X is, I think,
It's
you
before.
and Shell.
Oh, I'm a Gen X.
Yeah, you're Gen
I
X.
don't know my own Gen.
Well, welcome to the club. I'm not a Gen X, by the way. I'm a
What are
millennial.
you?
I'm a millennial.
You're a millennial.
Yeah, the poorest generation ever to live on Earth. So here I am. But I have a treasure in heaven. If that counts. I think
Why
that
are they
counts
the
more.
poorest? Because everything costs so much.
Yeah, that's right. Gen Zs are richer than millennials on average. Gen Xs as well. And the baby boomers, man. These are
They're the real ones.
they're the real deal.
So we've got all these generations, and I reckon the newer ones are not going to be as aware of pen pals. But back in the day, back in the good old days, I'm feeling old, we used to do pen pals. And I definitely had at least one. I remember one distinctly. My dad supported a mission. Her name was Helen Hall, and she was a missionary over in, I don't remember where, it might have been Thailand, but one of those places, Philippines, somewhere over there. And we would write for quite a few years of my younger years. I don't even remember why it stopped. Maybe we shifted as a family and somehow it stopped. But for quite a few years, we would write these pen pal letters. And because it was a foreign country, what would happen is there were people, and I'm thinking about it now, I wonder who they were and if that job probably doesn't exist anymore. But there were people who used to translate the letters, and so they would write in their language. It would come through. Somebody would translate the letter, and then it would come in with a translation to me in the mail. And so I would.
Oh, but wait, is Helen Hall? Was she not a native English speaker?
No, she was, but it wasn't her translating it. Maybe they had other people who did it for them, but there were people who would translate. Maybe they had people there.
So so you're receiving translated from Thai to English from some Thai type
Thai
people that you were
as well.
corresponding with?
Yeah, maybe it was Helen, like maybe it was her or other girls that lived there. But yeah,
right.
they would but imagine all the letters, because it was something quite big then. Imagine you having to translate all these letters, and pen pals were big back then.
Wow. And look, we're talking about translation in a pre-AI, pre-Google Translate era.
Pre-internet era.
So yeah, it was quite the feat, quite the work.
It was a big thing. So, yeah, so we used to have these pen pals, and we'd send a photo, and so you'd have an updated photo. And I'm pretty sure the girl, it's been a long time.
That is really cool, though.
It was fun. I think her name was something like Nang Nang Wing. That's what I remember my pen pal's name to be.
Okay.
I don't know how right I am. So if you're out there, Nang Nang Wing, I still remember you. So I've got a story today about two ladies who became pen pals and basically ended up like sisters. So their name is Joy and Diane, and they have been for over 60 years. They've been pen pals. And it all started because
Have they met in person?
they have now, but it took them 15 years before they met.
Wow.
So you can imagine their kids when they first start
Yeah.
out. But what cemented it, and it kind of reminds me of the mother's heart, what can do that is, after they became pen pals, and they used to only write a couple times a year, but their mothers, as these girls got along well, the mothers ended up becoming pen pals as well. And so it became kind of this family generational thing. And after 15 years they met, and later down the track the parents actually came over, the mothers came, and they've got pictures, and they all met as well. So one lives in Australia, in South Australia, and one is from Canada in Derby. I don't know if that's how you say it. So they were 12 years old when they first started writing.
That's very cute.
Yeah. So what happened was the letter was actually initially to a friend of this girl, so one of them had written from an ad in the paper, but her friend actually had so many pen pals already. She's like, here, I've got too many. You can have this one. Who would have known that gesture ended up like serving as a lifelong friendship for not only the two girls, but the two mothers as well?
Look, I'm curious. What is the kind of things that people write to one another if you're a pen pal with
Do you
someone?
know what's great about this? This is what they talked about, and I love it. When you're writing to someone who's in a different country, there's a lot of barriers that fall down, because you know that they don't know your friends, they don't know your family, so you almost feel like you can just be so raw and honest. Like sometimes, these
Like a confidant?
Yeah, these pen pals would become confidants. And it's a really special thing. I really wanted my girls to have it, but it was much harder to find by the time we got to the Gen Z, was it? It was harder to find anywhere that still did this.
This is so interesting.
So what happened? You guys were talking about this. We were thinking about, okay, what happens now in this day and age?
Yeah, look.
We don't write much anymore.
We don't write much anymore. To be honest, I think that when I was in school in the 1990s, pen pal, I think that they tried to encourage us to do a bit of pen pal, but it was not really a thing too much already. I think it was starting to fade out of fashion. And also, early on, I think that in 1998, I had my first computer. People were starting to send emails to one another. I think we had I think that we could not be pen pals anymore.
What
I
would
guess
we be?
we're like keyboard pals or
A keyboard pal?
And I remember that when I was young, the rage was chatting, these online chat rooms.
Yes, that definitely picked up, didn't it?
Picked up a little bit,
destroyed
and then
the pen pal.
That's right. And then a few, and shortly after, these places started to become really dangerous as well, because all kinds of creeps would.
That's what I thought of. Like your
these
pen
online
pals died,
chats.
but you can't just trust people anymore. Like you wouldn't feel like. Oh, I've got such an amazing... Let's see if I can do it really quickly. There's an amazing true story of where these girls were pen pals, and they were Christians, and it actually was through the Rwandan genocide. And it's an amazing true story of the way God brought things about, that it actually ended up being these refugees ended up coming to America. They ended up meeting, and they actually ended up being a part of each other's lives and impacting each other's lives in areas that were significantly really tough, but God used this relationship through all of that genocide into the refugee, into, being free people. It was an amazing story. If I can remember the name of it, I'll tell you after, when we come back from the next song. I'll look it up. Yeah. But it's a beautiful true story of how God used his pen pal.
That is really cool. I think it's such a wholesome thing to do.
But I know, what's so sad is so much can corrupt that. Like you were right in that it feels like the online I wouldn't want my children to do an online pen pal. Like,
No.
you can't trust that world.
But at the same time, I would love with my children, they had like a little friend and they are corresponding with them.
If you do it through
letter.
churches or something that's more
somewhere, and
community.
It would be very nice,
Yeah.
particularly if they kept it going and for a long time. And I think it's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful
Well,
connection.
these ladies
that you
did.
build.
From 1965, still, like they said, they're like sisters now.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Thank you for bringing that story up. That's definitely something to be grateful for. Pen pal.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
We are going to get into the story that it's really developing. We have new details emerged from the new hate speech laws, but there's some interesting things to consider about them. But before we get there, I would like to ask for a new quiz question, please, Tish. And actually, not the question, but the answer to the quiz question.
The answer. So the answer to this other one that had some cubits involved, so it was a number. The question was, how long was the ark? And the answer, which you can find in Genesis 6:15, is 300 cubits.
300
Which you got perfect.
cubits.
You
Yeah,
got
I got it.
correct
Yeah,
to the
I knew it was in the
exact number.
ballpark. I thought it was probably more of a broken number, but turns out to be 300.
300. What's the New Jerusalem? Do you remember what square by square the cubits were? Or you don't remember?
No, but look, it's massive. I think that I once was looking. We're talking about it would fill the best part of New South Wales.
So how big
One
would
big city.
300 cubits be?
So it would actually 300 cubits. It's I don't know, 100 meters.
Okay.
Something like that, maybe a bit more. I think a cubit is like 30. Have a look. I think it's 30
I'll have a look.
centimeters. Yeah, maybe something like that. So definitely not as big as a city.
I have some measurements I could tell you.
Yeah.
According to a message we received from David, it is 300 cubits long, translates to about 450 to 510 feet, or about a width of 75 to 85 feet, which is a height of 45 to 51, and in meters that would be 137 to 157,
Yeah.
Okay.
23 to 26 meters, and 14
So
to
like
16
3 Olympic
meters.
pools, roughly, in length.
Yes.
Okay, one Olympic pool is
Massive.
about 50 meters. Yeah, it's pretty big.
Pretty big, yeah. Wow.
It is pretty big. They have a replica of the Ark in Kentucky. I would
Have you
love to
been?
go there. No,
You didn't go
no, it's
when
my
you were
dream.
over there?
It's just like in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. I mean, you have to go there just to see the Ark.
I'd
because-
love to go too. My brother went with his family.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah.
it would have been amazing. I think it cost like over $1 billion or so to build it.
Yeah.
It's a
Don't
museum.
talk to the Kentucky people about that. They might get upset. I think
Oh,
the
really?
government helped.
Okay, well, let's talk about other things now. I want to talk
Yeah.
about the new hate speech laws that the federal government is enacting. So this is all in the wake of the Bondi shootings. And look, one thing that you probably have noticed is that once there's like a national calamity, national tragedy like that,
There's a reaction.
oftentimes there's a big reaction. For change, for legislations to be passed, and a lot of, but it's understandable. But at the same time, the risk is that these legislations are passed in a hurry, and they're not really well thought through.
It's that age old. It's a heated emotion, and that's when you should always rest on a decision, especially that important.
That's right. Well, but there's these new hate speech laws, and basically what the new hate speech laws, and I do not know how, to be honest, like how new they are, because in my impression, a lot of these dispositions are already covered. We spoke about it here yesterday. There are already laws against incitation of violence.
Okay.
In Australia. So you cannot incite violence against any person or group, or you cannot defame people. You cannot discriminate.
So do they need more than what those
So
laws are?
this is the question: like, how is this law going to really change anything, or is just a lot of busy work? It's not clear to me quite yet. It would be interesting if someone can tell me like what's the novelty about that one. But the name of the bill is called the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism Bill. And it's going to combine, this is one of the novelties, that it's going to combine hate speech issues with also gun restrictions. So it's all going to be combined in this one bill. It creates a new federal offense by making it illegal to publicly promote or incite racial hatred where the conduct would cause a reasonable person to feel intimidated, harassed, or fear violence. So again, I think that this was already covered by previous legislation.
Do you want me to show it? I've got it here in front of me, the incitation one. So publicly threatening or inciting violence. It's in the 1900 Act. So basically, if it's based on race, religious belief or affiliation, sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, HIV/AIDS status, if they intentionally or recklessly by a public act threatens or incites violence against another person or a group of persons because of those things, then they're guilty of the offence under law.
So I think that there's only a small subtle difference. One is like you're directly threatening. The other one, you're making remarks about that group that would make a reasonable person to feel intimidated, harassed, or fear violence. So that's the thing. So it's taking one step back and say, maybe they're not inciting violence directly, but if they're saying negative things about a certain group of people, and someone could feel intimidated, harassed, or fear violence, then that would be considered a criminal offense. This legislation includes a narrow defense where the speech. So this is the thing that I found pretty interesting. Where the speech, the writing, or the other form of public gesture was solely quoting religious texts for the purpose of religious teaching or discussion. So, if in that context of promoting or inciting racial hatred, where a person would feel intimidated, harassed, or fear violence, if this is in the context of a religious teaching or discussion, then it's not. It's a caveat. It doesn't count. It's not an offense. Which leads me to a number of questions. I've been preaching the Bible for 10 plus years now, and I've been reading it every year, and I've read the Bible like multiple times, dozens of times. To be honest, I cannot say, okay, how can you actually use the Bible unless you are destroying, deterring, and deteriorating the text so much? The Bible is not about it's not about inciting violence against anyone.
No, not at all.
At all. So number one, but that being said, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on Tuesday used the Old Testament of the Bible to explain the carve-out, saying the laws would set a principles-based test for conduct and speech that incited racial hatred toward another person or group. I do not know how you can justify racial hatred using the Bible, unless you are absolutely taking things completely out of context. And so to be honest, I don't know how that could even work. But this is what he said. Prime Minister Albanese, this is what he said. Pay attention. I encourage you to read the Old Testament. So, good thing that a Prime Minister is encouraging people. I encourage you too, by the way. So, but this is what he kept on saying. And see what's there, and see if you outlaw that, what would occur. So we need to be careful. We consulted with faith groups, not just with the Jewish community. We want to make sure there is the broadest possible support for this legislation, but we also want to make sure that there isn't unintended consequences of the legislation, and I end quotes here. So he's saying, hey, look, we cannot outlaw the Old Testament, because if we would outlaw the Old Testament, basically, what would happen with that? And I think that he was probably thinking like social convulsion. I don't know. There's going to be a massive backlash. Nobody's going to say, what are you kidding me? And I think that he's probably referring to perhaps some of the laws in the Old Testament that speak against, for example, homosexuality or So again, does the Bible teach that, people should hate people that, sinners? No. Love the sinner, hate the sin. That's what the Bible says. For the Christian, and for the Bible-believing person, God has certain standards that people may choose to follow or not to follow. If you have faith, you follow. If you don't have faith, you don't follow. But the Bible never gives at all any excuse to hate your neighbor as on the contrary, it says love your neighbor. And in the Old Testament as well. So I don't understand. So just because the Bible says that the Bible condemns certain behaviors, that does not mean that God doesn't love people, or that God has abandoned people, or rejected people, or should do the same. On the contrary, the Bible is absolutely adamant on the contrary, to say you have to love them, even more so, because they are brothers and sisters that are that perhaps they need love, they need help, or they need to be instructed about the words of God. And if they don't, well, it's who brings the judgment? The Bible says vengeance is mine, says the Lord. God is the one who's going to be bringing judgment. It's not our job is to love people. God's job is to judge, because he's the only one who can actually read hearts and minds. So, that being said, what can I say? Is this law going to be any effective? Because one of the groups that there are some effects that people can think it's positive. I'll tell you one of them. There is a Nazi group in Australia called the National Socialist Network.
Yeah, because they're going to outlaw the Nazi symbol. Or is that already?
Yeah, I think the symbol is already outlawed. But this is the National Socialist
Network.
Network.
Just got arrested a couple of days ago for having a Nazi symbol on her boat. So, it's already outlawed. It
is already outlawed, but look at this. So the neo-Nazi group National Socialist Network says that they will disband due to the proposed hate speech laws. So they're seeing these hate speech laws coming, and this is what they said in their social media. If the laws pass, there will be no way to avoid the organization being banned. This disbandment is being done before the laws take effect to avoid former members of the organizations from being arrested and charged. So I guess that it's a good thing. So you have this neo-Nazi group saying, oh, look, if we're going to be disbanded because we are afraid that these laws are going to put us in jail. So, hey, guys, it was, thanks for everything that you've done, but we're out of here. We're not going to be hating people anymore. Which begs some... which makes me think, is it really so... This is how you solve the problem of hate. It's just
but then they go underground.
They go underground, right?
Yeah.
There's two groups that are mostly targeted by that. This neo-Nazi National Socialist Network, and there is a group called the Hizb al-Tahrir. I don't know if I'm butchering it, but it's like it's a Islamic organization. It's considered to be a terrorist group in many countries, but they are free to operate and exist here in Australia. And they are the ones complaining, and they're pushing back against the law because it says no, we this is a democracy, we cannot have this, and so on. But this is another group that would probably be outlawed if these laws come through. Now, with all of that said, and another interesting thing is, because of that religious caveat, imagine though if you are let's say they're trying to ban some fundamentalists or some radical Islamic groups that have a very anti-Jewish rhetoric, right? But if they're saying that, hey, we are quoting from our sacred books, and we're just and we are quoting that this is just from the purpose of teaching and discussion. There you go. They can say anything that they want, and they're going to be under the exception of the law already. So the thing that they're trying to ban, that's the caveat.
In that law,
that's
the new
right.
one.
So now everybody that is doing that can do some kind of racial disparage against someone, and by the way, don't do it. That's my call. Don't do it. But if someone does it, they can say, this is just in the context of teaching and discussing a religious text.
Ask a quick question.
Yeah.
What's the point? Okay, if you look at America, you've got, let's put them on the freedom side if you want to. Look at North Korea, as controlled as can be. And yet, in all of this, like you're telling me, like when we were talking in the break, we were talking about America and the corruption up there anyway. It's like, why are they wanting these laws in place? Why the control when evil happens anyway, whether you're as free as possible or not? Evil is happening. So what do you think the push is?
Look, I think that what they wanting to achieve is they want to stop violence against minority groups, persecuted groups, whoever they are. Maybe in LGBTQ plus communities.
So that's the intention?
Maybe in this case in particular, Jewish communities. Okay, and basically what they want to say is that before it even starts, even if people are talking online and having a rhetoric of the Jews are this, the Jews are that, and talking hate about the Jews, this is going to become an offense.
But it never does. It'll always still be there. There'll always be these problems.
I think that the hope is that it would not be in public.
So we're going to go underground.
Yeah, they will go underground, but at least not in public.
Is it freedom the better option? Freedom of choice, freedom of speech.
That is the question that they have to wait. The thing is, freedom of speech is always a better spot if people know how to use it. But then if people don't know how to use it, how do you suggest that Jewish communities are going to be protected, for example? If someone comes and say, hey, we should kill all Jews or whatever it is, how are you going to defend them? How are you going to people can tell, yeah, this is just freedom of speech. I'm just using my freedom. But you're inciting hatred. You're inciting violence against a people group. So I understand the intent of the law, and I think the intent of the law is really good. It's to prevent damage from happening. Now, my question is it going to be an effective law? And I think that the jury is out there. We'll see. Okay. I hope so. I really do hope so. And the problem is when we're trying to, as we mentioned before, other countries that started going to that slippery slope of, hey, let's just control people's speeches here so you don't say things that are hateful. It starts with that, but then there's always a risk that
you got to go tighter.
The definition of hate speech expands and expands and expands and becomes, hatred to a political party, hatred to this ideology and so on. We're not there in Australia. Thank God we are not. But there's always a risk. There's always a risk. And as you mentioned, these measures, they cannot change the person's heart. No. And it's very hard to do anything when they go underground either. So maybe it's a step in the right direction. I think that there's a good intent behind it. If it's going to be effective or not, I don't know. I'm really hoping it is. But I would definitely need to see it working to make my mind.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
We are going to have an interview today with a very special person because that special person is our very own DJ Shells. And I actually wanted to ask you, Shells, if you can share with us, because you were telling me a little bit about the impact that both prayer and gratitude had in your life. But I want to start asking, how were you before you learned all these things? Was gratitude not part of your life? Tell me a little bit about how you were before you learned more about gratitude with God.
So I would say I didn't have gratitude or prayer in my life. I didn't really have God in my life. When I think about it, a lot of my upbringing had been impacted so significantly from abuse that had been from my poor mother, who had, some significant childhood abuse. And that had really been a overarching just struggle in our family's life because of what had happened to her. And I think because of that and because, she was someone who always tried really hard to better herself from that, and she wanted goodness, but it affected her for all of her life, and she ended up dying quite young actually because, I think of the life she had. But I think because of that, there was a lot of negativity and struggle and pain, and so there wasn't a lot of gratitude. We kind of grew up in a country, really conservative type of church and environment. We were at church, but it was very much like the doom and gloom of the end of the world, like scary, type of where it can be emphasized. If people haven't been in the church or known God that long, they may not understand that. But there were places in that back in those days that were a lot more on that, scary conservative side. Probably impacted more too by my lack of understanding of the gospel. So maybe for whatever reason, that side of things stood out more. There may have been actually beautiful stuff there as well, but without knowing God, it wasn't something that, I actually interacted with or saw in my growing up. But
would you describe yourself or your general mindset before? Because I haven't met you really before. Would you describe yourself as being a bitter person?
I didn't feel as much bitterness, but I would say a negative person. I would say I really...
Like how? Give me some example here. When you say like you thought yourself to be a negative person, what kind of negativity?
It's a funny mix. Without God, it's a funny... I was actually a pretty happy kid in a lot of ways. But the type of negativity that can impact you without God is it's always somebody else's fault.
A lot of blame shifting.
Blame shifting, absolutely. It's not just you're not at fault. It's like the problem can't be me, and you've got to always be okay. And if I'm not okay, or if the person doesn't like me, well, it's not me, it's them. Because you're trying to stay okay and find this elusive happiness. Yeah. And this elusive, for me, without God, there was like, what's the purpose of life? Because I grew up in the fear and the panic and the anxiety, and my mum had a lot of that really badly from what she went through. Panic, anxiety, fear of death was, there was pretty bad trauma in my upbringing.
Were you afraid of rejection? Like, do you have that fear? Because one of my theories is, and it's not my theory, this is something that, a lot of people believe that, is that when we have this fixed mindset and we're blaming shift to others, when you look at the roots of that, there is the underlying fear of being rejected. So if I'm not perceived as being perfect, if I'm perceived as being faulty or having some faults or failures or something like that, that means that people will not like me, people will reject me, I will not be accepted, I will be alone. So therefore, I will protect my quote-unquote integrity of my image of who I am by deflecting blame so that I don't, because if I live in this illusion that I am perfect, then you don't like me, well then the problem is on you.
Yeah.
Is that like did you have this rejection dynamics in your family?
That, like my personality is very much like I am a bit of like that empath type of personality. I learned a lot from my mother. I was with her a lot as the youngest. And I think she struggled so much with that rejection. And in her day, if you were abused, often you were more isolated and, people didn't want to know about it. They didn't want to have to deal with it. And so she struggled with that rejection so much. I saw her whole life struggle with trying to be loved and accepted. And I think that flowed through a lot to me, wanting to be accepted, wanting justice, wanting, people to like me and to want me and to be loved, which then had that flip side of because you wanted that, yes, then you blame and you're negative. We don't have a lot of time. So if I can flip into and now go, okay, so
how do you change from being that negative mindset into
so
what
just
happened?
Struggling through, and all of that struggle culminated in not only, my mum's life was struggle, all the trauma, pain, she passed away. It wasn't until God came in that my life literally changed. And he did that. We don't have enough time to go in the depths of it, but it was in the span of a week. He came in, the Bible started making sense. I was at the pit of despair. I had literally lost all hope. All I could see before me was similar things like my mum had, and that was in and out of mental hospitals, medicated, terrible stuff, to where it was like there was, it was just dark, really dark. So God came in and saved me at that point. He opened my eyes to the Bible, and I just fell in love with that. I could see, it's like he unveiled me. Everything just had beautiful light now. I could see through the grave. That was the light through the grave was one of the greatest gifts he gave me, because it was dark. And it's funny, that light made the darkness darker, because I've realized what it is for people who have no hope and that darkness. And
what did you know that was new that you didn't know before? And you learned this new thing about God, and that made the difference. What was it? That sort of snapped you out of that darkness?
No, it was an unveiling. He unveiled me. It was without a doubt. Like the Bible started making sense all of a sudden. Like it was so sudden within a week that it's nothing I did or learned.
What kind of concepts like you?
So I learned God's not a liar. So the first things he gave me were the promises, God's beautiful promises that we can speak over ourselves, even sing, the Psalms over ourselves. So that was the first steps in mind healing, was learning to put the good in, get the bad out, but you need to replace it with the good. Speaking God's promises over my life has literally been a lifesaver for someone who has struggled with panic and anxiety her whole life.
Was that a specific promise that really made the difference for you in that
Once
early days?
I knew God couldn't lie and there were all these promises, God became this solid rock that I could rely on and that I could go to. And even now when I falter or struggle, and there are times where I've started to make mistakes and be negative, and when you start to go down the negativity track, your mind will start to struggle again. But you know what? He's faithfully there. And, I've really learned that it is so important to do the promises, to praise, to thank God, and to realize that, we're all sinners. We all fall short. And we need to have, I just had an interview not long ago on the radio for my book show that I'll be airing with Dr. Dick Tibbetts on Forgive to Live. And it's amazing principles on understanding and forgiving and surrendering that bitterness, even when people have done the wrong thing. It's not hurting anyone but ourselves. And so claiming those promises and speaking, even thanking for everyday stuff. Like you said, I've got to do the dishes. Oh, but praise God I have food. Something I had this shower once that used to annoy me, but it's like, but praise God I have running water and a shower. So learning that has literally healed my mind. It's just been phenomenal. And learning to praise the promises over my life, God's word over my life, it just opens your soul, and God comes in so much more. So I honestly can say that God literally He saved my life. In time, He saved my marriages, and that is where prayer came into it. I learnt to pray. Now, I'm not perfect at this. I have seasons where I struggle more and seasons where I'm better at it, without a doubt.
But if you see yourself that you're being tempted by, like, say, negative thoughts, what are usually the things that God speaks to your mind? How to escape from that?
Yeah, so I go through. I love the promise that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but I can't remember the little bit of that, but fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. I just go. The Psalms are a really quick, perfect go-to for if David was so raw and honest. If you need, like, God will just speak to you. The funny thing is, I don't think in all of the time that I've gone to Him that He has ever given me a condemnation. There might have been once or twice where He's given me a reality check, but never has He made me feel condemned ever. He has always made me feel loved. And honestly, like 99.9% of the time, even when I might be being frustrating or annoying, He'll come to me with love and it'll soften me. It'll give me new hope and strength. The amount of times I've cried out to Him in the pit of despair, I feel like for me, I lost my health after having the girls, and it's been a hard journey that can ebb and flow. But He has always been there for me, even though I don't have the same health as a normal person, and it can be challenging at times. When I'm there and I cry out to Him, I know He'll be there for me, and there'll be a promise, maybe a devotional, a song. There'll be something where He just speaks that love into my heart and reminds me that I'm here. I love you. Learning to hear His voice through those things, and that's taken years of reading the Bible. And I wasn't somebody because some people have devotionals and say they can hear Him, but that's hard for me. I heard Him through His Word. I hear Him through Him in those ways. And as I've learnt to hear Him in that, you've got a best friend beside you no matter where you are.
Look, I loved your testimony, and I think that I can see the fruit of that, because you would never strike me as a negative person. On the contrary, as a very positive person. But I know it's the power of God in your life.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.